Farming food and fashion for a discerning world is serious business in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There are new opportunities everywhere just waiting for the open-minded. Sarah's Country shines a light on the matters that matter most. And here's your host, Sarah Perriam.
Kia ora and welcome to Sarah's Country, where we take farming, food and fashion for a discerning world seriously here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, what do I mean by farming, food and fashion? It's a term that I have coined because, while we are ultimately in the primary sector, we're in the business of farming and growing the key natural ingredients that form our highest value exports, food and fashion. And what you put under those categories seems to make up a lot of what we take and grow from the natural world. There is a challenge that has been laid before us in the sector. It is to embrace a changing world that balances business that's sensitive to people, profit and the environment, all collectively together. And sometimes it's not that easy, especially when not everyone is at the table and there doesn't seem to be a hell of a lot of listening going on. However, I have a feeling that hopefully 2021 will be a different year than the previous, let's say, 3. I feel in this week's Newsmaker show, we're going to shine a light on the frustrations that New Zealand's landowners have faced in balancing the demands of so many on them. However, there are efforts being made to turn the tide on with our learnings from the past to build a better future. There's been a record global dairy trade index with Westpac's prediction of a $7.50 kilo milk solids to see through to the end of the year payout. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we will see a rush on dairy conversions like we did in 2013 as an alternative land use gain momentum. Westpac senior agri-economist Nathan Penny will explain the fundamentals of the demand that is predominantly coming from China. Drier weather ahead doesn't necessarily mean we will have feed restrictions, as it has already been buoyant for many, or the humidity from the tropics may not come and bring more rain. But where does that leave a southerly blast behind this hot weather ahead? Phil Duncan from Rural Weather gives us valuable context to the weather over the next week. A Māori Land Court decision to dismiss a bid to stop 1080 being dropped on a Hawke's Bay Māori Trust land, and Osprey's new plan announced this week to make more targeted TB testing in higher risk areas doesn't necessarily mean that the group of farmers financially affected from a bovine TB outbreak in North Canterbury will be happy. Lloyd Holloway, who's been farming on the Napier-Taupo Road, is angry and says the disease will only keep spreading. He will join us towards the end of Sarah's Country. But firstly, on the Newsmaker show this week, I'm happy to say that the term dirty dairying is gone. Well, certainly it's gone from the vocabulary of the organisation that coined it back in 2012. Fish and Game New Zealand's new chair will share with us his direction very shortly about how his and the mandate of the current council understand the need to bridge the divide between anglers, hunters and farmers.
This is Sarah's Country, produced in alliance with Farmers Weekly, the place New Zealand farmers turn to for a trusted source of in-depth agricultural journalism. Stay connected to the matters that matter most by subscribing to My Daily Digest at farmersweekly.co.nz.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits.
Children.
Chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
Or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this.
But at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help you farm,
Grow.
Milk. Dredge.
Drier, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
The term dirty dairying has gone. The term coined by Fish and Game back in 2012 to describe the environmental impacts of dairy farming widely vilified farmers in Aotearoa, New Zealand. The angst and deteriorating relationship between anglers, hunters and farmers has seen the demand for a better attitude from its powers that be, and the change of guard at the top could be just that going forward. There is furthermore on this in this week's Farmers Weekly, pulled together by agri-journalist Neil Wallace. Ray Grubb, the Fish and Game New Zealand chair, joins us now from his lovely camping spot in the Coromandel. I understand you're standing on one foot, waving your arm in the air to get some signal, Ray. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Can I say I'm having the great pleasure of cold dock showers as well, and pit toilets. Back to the way New Zealand used to be, I think.
Oh, you certainly have found a lovely treasured place, because there's a lot of the Coromandel that has certainly changed from what people used to know of it 10, 20 years ago holidaying there too, Ray.
Yeah, on the Waikawa, north of Colville on the east coast. Glorious place. It is most stunning, and it's one of those dock campsites that they opened up a couple of years ago because all the coastal campsites are getting sold as prime land. So it's great, beautiful place.
Fantastic. And we have Phil Duncan from Rural Weather coming up in this Newsmakers show, and I understand he's going to let us know that you're in for some treat of some weather up there, Ray, so good timing. But Ray, we're joining you on your holiday. I really appreciate your time. In your new role as chair of Fish and Game New Zealand, it has been in rather unsettled change of the guards with Martin Taylor, the CEO, departing just before Christmas, resigning, and you've come on board with what you have stated as a lens with a less antagonistic approach from Fish and Game. What will that look like under your tenure?
I think the words consult rather than confront are the ones we want to look for. We've always had great relationships with farmers. I fished through farming properties. I owned a business that was part of a farming community for 20 years. And I think the times have changed a bit. The attitudes of everybody towards conservation of resources and clean water has shifted significantly over the last 5 years. There's so much good work being done by farmers in all categories, Hawke catchment group and others like that, who are restoring wetlands and restoring habitat. I think it's time to celebrate the good things that are being done, which will highlight the bad things that are being done. So the tide has shifted.
Ray, you owned a business on the West Coast, Brunner Lodge, with your wife, where you were a fishing guide as well, and you would have had a lot of interaction with the farming community, a lot dairying on the West Coast. Was it necessary to bring in such a harsh term, do you believe, to shock the farming sector into action?
I think it possibly served its purpose. It's not a term that I would have used. You can build relationships. You don't actually have to fracture them. But having said that, it served its purpose. It got public attention. If that's what people wanted to do, that's what it did. As I said, it's done its time. It's time to move into a relationship where we actually talk behind the scenes. We actually make things happen without confrontation.
Do you hope to publicly stand in your position as the chair of Fish and Game and be able to sort of repair some of the public perception towards farming and state there a bit of a wraparound of the arms and a collective approach together with the farming sector so that New Zealand's society sees that this is a new attitude moving forward?
I think that's up to the farmers. They have to demonstrate to the New Zealand public the good things that they're doing and the ways in which they're changing attitudes and changing their approach to the environment. One of the things that's really clear is that the modern world of farming now encompasses much more than simply milking cows or having beef cattle and sheep. It involves a high level of technology And that technology makes it possible to measure the impact on the environment much more closely than was ever done before. Those tools are available to farmers and they're using them. And the modern farmer knows exactly what they're doing to the environment. They go to a lot of trouble to make changes to reduce their impact.
One of those technologies that has evolved whereby fishing, game and farming community, particularly irrigators, have been working together is around how water storage and the ability of managing summer's low flows can help. Do you believe there's been an attitudinal change across the council on how this can be a positive?
Not enough yet. Regional councils are responsible for setting the rules for clear water. At the moment, we use far too much water for all kinds of industrial purposes, not just farming, when in fact we could store water, take it at peak flows, measure it out and leave ample water in the rivers. I'm a supporter of irrigation if it facilitates clean, plentiful water in streams. It's eminently feasible, and I think many farmers are now making investments in water storage, and many more can.
Where have been some examples over your time, and I know that you've been involved in the Otago Fish and Game Council for quite some time as well, whereby a close relationship around our rivers and streams have seen fish stocks be able to survive in summer due to the likes of flushing and systems that are working and what we can learn from?
Well, I think the Pomahaka Catchment Group is a prime example of ways in which they're restoring the environment. They're planting stream banks, they're significantly reducing nutrient loading, they're providing for the water, the amount of water that we need in summer. There's still room to go with all of these things, but people like the Land Care Trust are investing heavily in catchment groups who take the whole of a water catchment, not just the part, and say that if we take this catchment as a whole, we can actually provide a much better environment with each person within the catchment playing their own little part. So I think the Pomahaka Catchment Group is a great example. The Tyree people are now doing good work as well.
And the word catchment group is a very common phrase here on Sarah's Country, of one which we proudly talk about, Ray. You would be happy to note, and that there is a lot of farmers that are absolutely enjoying being a part of it for more reasons actually than just the environment, bringing communities back together around a common respect for the geological environment they live in. So it's absolutely fantastic. What will be the measures of your success, do you believe, in this particular position as chair, Ray?
When we have effective rules in regional councils where everybody knows exactly what's expected of them to provide for the people who want to use water for more than just industrial purposes. So people who swim, who kayak, who canoe, who take their dogs walking along river banks, 70% of the work the Fish and Game does is for the good of the general public, not just habitat for trout and salmon. And when the regional councils set rules that are adequate to provide for the public's enjoyment of our waterways, then I think we've been successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly when it comes to the regional councils rolling out the freshwater national policy statements, how do you believe they will be able to be implemented when it comes to region by region, and there's so many different elements to take into account?
That's why you have regional councils. They need to judge what is appropriate for the NPSFN, the freshwater management rules, in their own regions and national environment standards. They're going to have to, it's not simply enough to say the national environment standards apply, because each region does, as you say, differ. They're going to have to put rules in place that match the needs of their local environment to achieve the standards that the government has been setting with national policy statements. That's not going to be easy. Some of them, there are test cases about the start. Te Mana o Te Wai is a critical part of that. And Otago is, I think, going to be one of the first off the block. Southland is pretty close. a real test of the will of regional councils and of the elected members of them. And certainly everybody's lining up to show an interest and to require the regional councils to do their job properly. They have not done so in the past, in my view.
You have a lot to take on board, Ray, in your new role as Chair of Fish and Game New Zealand. Of course, an attitudinal change is something that is quite massive and takes some time. But at the same time, the first review of the organisation by the government in 35 years. How are you feeling about that?
Positive. It's long overdue. You can't leave a piece of legislation and a system unchecked and unchallenged for 35 years. You need regular reviews to make sure it's fit for purpose. The people who have done the review are people we would have significant confidence in. They're extremely competent. And we have a new minister who is an extraordinarily competent young married lady. And we're looking forward to the results we'll get out of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The incoming Chair of Fish and Game New Zealand, Ray Grubb, talking to us there out of the Coromandel, and of course is focusing on very first job on the job is to throw out that term dirty dairying. Of course, more on farmersweekly.co.nz. Thanks you to Neil Wallace. Now, talking about that wonderful Māori lady, Kiri Allen, the Minister of Conservation, I certainly would like to have her on the show to further discuss this. And if anybody would like to get on my crusade, I've just heard about, we've been witnessing it for decades, evolving to a problem. My accountant told me the other day he shot 7,000 rabbits in Wanaka since lockdown. They are of plague proportions. And so one of very many things that Miss Kiri Allen will have to deal with going into 2021. And of course, I want to hear from you, Sarah at sarahscountry.com, with all of your wonderful ideas that you send me on stories that you would like to see on Sarah's Country to go deeper into the matters that matter most. And of course, we do this in alliance with the fantastic team at Farmers Weekly. Now, coming up, China's resurgent appetite for milk fat products has lifted dairy prices to recent record levels. Westpac's senior agri-economist Nathan Penny explains what is driving the demand.
This is Sarah's Country. Catch the latest on the matters that matter most wherever you are. Listen to Sarah's Country on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple or Google Podcasts. Try asking Alexa or Siri. Play Sarah's Country on podcast.
We're a large deer farm and very proud deer farmer at that. I grew up here as a little boy. It is just an amazing lifestyle. I could never live in a city ever again. Just the big open spaces and just the peacefulness of it all. I think deer are very majestic, very intelligent animal. Having deer that are under pressure or anything like that or overstocked, they really don't perform as well. You should really be spreading them out on beautiful pastures, keeping them happy. A happy deer is a good deer. And good feed, good grass. We renew our pastures all the time in the paddocks, so we're always getting the best quality grass. Well, I guess in the wild, they don't have the luxury of the grass that we put in front of them here as a farmed animal. I believe we've got some of the best English type deer in the country, if not the world. And to associate our brand with Silver Fern Farms brand works for us. Without the likes of Silver Fern Farms, then there's no point doing this. So they're very, very important for us. I'm Mark Tapley, very proud suppliers venison to Silver Fern Farms.
Welcome back to Sarah's Country. If you've just joined us live, of course, on podcast, where we are tuned in by tens of thousands of people around the world, catching up on the matters that matter most to farming, food and fashion from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Now, post-COVID demand from China for milk powder and a resurgent appetite for milk fat products in several markets has lifted dairy prices to recent record levels. Global HQ's agri-journalist Hugh Stringleman outlines in this week's Farmers Weekly that the most recent global dairy trade index rose 4.8% in the second auction of January, and now has risen 17% over the past 3 months alone. We're now joined by Westpac senior agri-economist Nathan Penny on the phone. Thank you so much, Nathan. Now, this renewed demand, is it certainly just all coming out of the Chinese returning to restaurants?
I think for a start, I think the very recent uptick has been largely a milk fat and butter and cream story, and that does point to Chinese consumers sort of getting back to normal habits, which means eating out and buying things from the bakery where products have got a lot of cream and butter and the like in them. So that's a really good sign that things are getting quite close to normal back in China, given that they're largely COVID free and their economy is going great guns.
I have read, though, as we're heading into what's termed Chinese New Year, that there is still a lot of worry around eating out and the food security consciousness of the Chinese. Do you believe that that will have any effect?
Yeah, well, I think Chinese New Year always impacts demand. It ramps up as we approach Chinese New Year and then cools off while they go on holiday. In terms of food safety, food safety is very big in China, as it is in many markets, but particularly so there, and that's only heightened with COVID and some of the anecdotes of potentially COVID being on some goods or frozen products in particular. So that will only continue, and given New Zealand has COVID-free status, essentially, that has been good for New Zealand demand for products from China.
How much has it got to connected to China's economic performance overall? I mean, it's one of the only countries that's showing positive growth following an absolutely devastating year globally with COVID in 2020. Because, this is a record GDP since 2014. Yeah,
so China has really turned things around, and that's probably due to, first of all, their ability to control COVID and get on top of it very quickly, and that led to them being able to open up from lockdowns faster than other parts in the world. But also, sort of really good policy coordination from Chinese authorities in terms of getting their economy back up and running. And as you said, after a 10% fall in one quarter, I think it was back in the March quarter, they ended up still growing over 2020 as a whole. And like you said, the only major economy to do so last year.
So therefore, Westpac have added a 50% to the forecasted seasonal farm gate milk price to $7.50. How confident are you that that will end up in the pockets of dairy farmers?
Yeah, look, we made that change last week, so lifted our forecast by 50 cents, as you say. The data is sort of staring us in the face now. Prices have lifted across the board, and that was the key thing we were looking for, to get confirmation that milk fat, or the more say premium products within dairy, were also joining the party, so to speak, as we've seen whole milk powder and other powders lift earlier. So it's really we've seen the lift. We think there's a little bit more to come. The momentum's good in the market. We're quite confident that we'll number for farmers around that $7.50 for this season.
It's interesting you're quoted saying that you don't think that there'll be a clamour of dairy expansion due to this.
That's right, yes. So, unlike, if we go back 4, 5, 6 years ago when we had the record $8.40 milk price, we're seeing, direct conversions of, a couple of hundred a year. But now there's a few reasons why we don't think that will happen. First reason is competition for land. Other sectors are doing well too. So horticulture, for example, doing very well. A lot of conversions of land into kiwi fruit, for example. And the other thing is, the environmental limits and regulations around how intensively dairy farmers can farm. That's also sort of led to, perhaps more difficulties into converting farms. So we don't see, a lot of expansion in dairy over the next few years on that basis.
And of course, with farm values as well, where does that leave that? That'll be positive to push through a few more sales.
Yeah, we think this year might be a bit of a turning point on that front. The first thing we'll see is, and we have, I think people have been noticing around the regions a few more sales being confirmed. So we'll get a really clear view of where prices are just at the moment, with a few more sales on the board. And then, ultimately, as the income starts to flow this year, and we think into next season as well, we do see the prospect for dairy farm values stabilising early this year and then later on starting to lift again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. Nathan Penny, Senior Agri-Economist, economist, my apologies, for Westpac, joining us there, talking about the record GDT since 2014, and of course that new prediction out from Westpac of $7.50 a kilo of milk solids. Now, up next, what does the next 7 days look like ahead for New Zealand? Are we going to be drier than average? But also, too, what is coming right in behind it? Rural Weather's Phil Duncan will join us with all the information you need for the coming couple of weeks.
This is Sarah's Country. Join the conversation. Have thoughts on an interview? Or have you got questions you want answered by a future guest? Let us know. Email sarah@sarahscountry.com.
Every morning, Kiwi farmers wake up to produce high quality food. Yet, every night, some Kiwi families are going to sleep hungry. Meet the Need is a charity founded by farmers, and it's here to change all that. We're about New Zealand farmers feeding New Zealand families by donating a small part of what we grow when we can. You can help us make sure no one in New Zealand goes to sleep hungry again. Visit meettheneed.org and follow us on social.
Well, it is often that both the front page story will also come together with, of course, our weather section. And front page of this week's Farmers Weekly is no different, where journalist Gerald Pickard highlights the warm temperatures and frequent summer rains have combined together to a bumper season for summer feed crops and pasture covers for livestock farmers in most regions up and down the country. But there's regions such as Northland are getting very dry, and areas of the Haraki Plain also with some declining pasture growth. However, it's a mixed bag, as highlighted in the article. A Pyro dairy farm says he would typically struggle to grow a 21-tonne maize crop on his 171 hectare farm, but proudly boasts that he's looking to set to do a 22-tonne. Now, we know that farming can turn on a dime though with weather, and that is why we're going to continuously bring you every Monday in-depth long-range forecasts from Phil Duncan of Rural Weather on Sarah's Country, both live around 7:30 and on the podcasts for your convenience on demand. Now, Phil, there's been a lot of numerals 30 floating all over the morning breakfast weather report. How deep will this bite over the next week to 10 days?
Yeah, hi Sarah. We've got a pulse of hot weather coming out of the Australian interior, and it's sort of fueled by La Nina humidity as well, as we see the big high that's over New Zealand right now slowly start to move away. So we're going to get a nor'wester that's both half Australian and half tropical, and a nor'wester is a hot, even in winter it can be quite warm. So this is sort of a triple whammy of warmth coming out of Australia. I think a lot of people will say, thank goodness, after last week, because it sort of felt like maybe summer had finished with snow falling on the ranges. But now we're seeing summer really getting into the peak mode. So pretty hot this week, but we're not fully finished with these colder southerlies as well. There's another one coming later this week, although it's much shorter lived.
Yeah, absolutely. And just briefly touching on that, there is a great article in this week's Farmers Weekly from Richard Rennie as a bit of a 12 months on and how the Australian farmers are getting on. And it's a lot more positive, and it's turned for the positive for them. So really, really great to see. So check that out. But as you say, it's more about the extremes of the swings than anything, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting some big extremes at the moment, from really hot to really cold, which is maybe not always a normal New Zealand summer. We're used to having some cooler days in the mix, but lately it's been quite extreme. The cold last week was really quite nuts, and so was the storm that produced it. But you talk about Australia, the map I've got behind me here is the humidity map. So everywhere you see bright blue, that's where the humidity is at its highest, and so is the rainfall. And what you notice about this is in the middle of Australia, Alice Springs area, it's humid, it's raining, and there's actually an ex-cyclone going through central Australia at the moment that's going to end up coming our way in a few days' time. So this is the reason why we're getting the hot weather, but the blue all over Australia, that is so different to a year ago when they were in major drought. And remember, it was this time a year ago we were getting, or just finishing getting, those giant ash clouds, those smoke clouds that were coming out from the bushfires. Completely different story this year. The La Nina rain has fallen, and it's just a matter of time, we hope, before it gets into those dry areas of northern New Zealand that you were just talking about.
Oh, it was absolutely crazy. I remember being in Golden Bay, which of course you can see that red, it was the red moon sky. It was just absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's certainly come a long way in 12 months. Now, you mentioned La Nina. How much more have we got to go?
See, we're at about the halfway, which is why I'm not overly surprised that we've seen a bit of a lack of rain. There have been some downpours, and that great story that you mentioned about around Pairo and eastern Waikato and Hauraki Plains areas, but it's been hit and miss, the rain in those areas. So one farm might have had it, another one several k's away might not. As we go through the next couple of days, I've got a couple of maps to show you. This is just quickly the departure from normal on Tuesday, for those who are watching. It's this area in the dark and the red basically means whole half of the South Island is going to be over 8 degrees above normal. And then we get to the end of the week and you've got this huge southerly, which doesn't look anything like La Nina, which you were just asking me about. So where is La Nina? This is Thursday, by the way, showing that southerly coming through. So La Nina appears next week on this jumbled map. But what we're showing next week, this is next Tuesday, the potential of 2 or 3 lows in a row, maybe a cyclone in northern Australia. This looks more like La Nina, and this encourages all these windy, humid nor'easters to the top. Now, this GFS model from America shows that storm pretty close to northern New Zealand, but when we go to their competitors, if you like, the European maps, they're showing a low sort of a long way off from us and just windy, dry easterlies. But either way, this is a sign that La Nina is not finished. And the lows, you see all at the top of the screen, there's 4 different lows plus a cyclone. That's showing that La Nina is peaking and doing what it should be doing. And even if La Nina does start to fade, we're still going into February and March is when the sea temperatures are at their highest, and all of that combines to help bring in some rainmakers to the very north.
The worst part is extreme dry, soaking up any moisture possible left in the soil, and then an absolute downpour over top of that. Can we ask, please, Phil, for a light sprinkling of moisture from the southerly?
Well, look, this is the rainfall map for the next 2 weeks. And when you first look at it, it might be a bit confusing. You might not even really be able to read the key. But really what you're looking for is this dark blue area coming down. That's La Nina rain, and that's that low we just showed you. So what it's saying is over the next 2 weeks, There's a lot of rain dropping south here, but whether it hits New Zealand or not, that's the million-dollar question, because, this one here is showing it's missing Northland and Northern New Zealand's at a chance of getting it, but the pale blue you see on this side is 5 millimeters of rain over 2 weeks. So basically no rain here and 200 millimeters of rain just there. So that low coming out of the tropics is massively important. And the other feature is over in Australia, how dry it is. Central Australia, south of Australia, it's all very, very dry there as well. So that bodes better for the Southern Ocean and for our viewers and listeners down in the lower South Island who are sick and tired of these wintry snaps coming through. This is a sign that it might be a bit more settled. The green here in Southland, 15 millimeters over 2 weeks. So that's a lot drier than it's been.
Yeah, absolutely. My sister gave her sister-in-law and brother-in-law a sprinkler for Christmas, and they live in Southland, and they thought that it was a funny joke. But, Southland, they are absolutely sick of the rain and would love to see some warmth.
Yeah, that's why, this week is a bit off and on. We've got this warm start to the week, but it's not very flash later in the week. Thursday will feel like winter again in Southland with highs of 11 degrees and 12 degrees and maybe 13 if you're lucky. And there'll be snow again on the ranges, but it's short-lived. And behind it, more high pressure. These big highs that are down here are moving in towards the South Island. But, this low here, this is really significant if it reaches northern New Zealand. The last 2 years, though, have shown that high pressure has really dominated the north of New Zealand to the point that it's almost getting unusual now. 2 years of high pressure blocking rainmakers like this from coming down. So we'll be waiting to see very closely. But when you've got 200 millimeters out here at East Cape and 5 millimeters just west of Auckland, that is such a fine line. And once again, this kind of highlights how narrow New Zealand is and how one single system can bring all that rain, a month's worth, or if it misses us, we end up having a month's less rain than we really should be having.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you so much. And for those who have been listening along on podcast, you can actually watch back this interview with Phil Duncan on seriouscountry.com because, of course, he points out a lot on the maps but I'm sure that you were able to follow along quite clearly there. And Phil, more so, to celebrate is the partnership of Weather Watch or Rural Weather, the new brand, coming together with Global HQ. And there's a full article in this week's Farmers Weekly all about it. Can you share more details on where your future lies in conjunction with the team at Farmers Weekly?
Yeah, it's really exciting. We set up Rural Weather about a year or so ago. It's done really well without any promotion or marketing. It's just naturally been liked by those who have used it. So Rural Weather teaming up with Globe and Farmers Weekly and Sarah's Country as well, obviously. And we're trying to just basically share all this weather data we've got, packaging it up in ways that have never been done before in New Zealand. And the data isn't just a forecast for your nearest big town or your nearest big airport, which is what we've all grown up with. This is hyper-local data. This is all crunched by the IBM supercomputer, and ruralweather.co.nz has got all the local rainfall numbers for where you are, all the local humidity levels every single hour for the next 10 days, wind chills, humidex, which is basically the feels like temperature with humidity and heat. We've got all that, and barometric pressure as well, graph form or data, whichever you prefer. So if you've been listening to this and haven't been able to see what I'm talking about, you can see all of these maps at ruralweather.co.nz, and it's supposed to be a secret, but might as well share it, that we've got an app which is almost ready, but it's just sort of in the final phases of testing so that we don't send you all multiple alerts about things that are irrelevant. So we're just fine-tuning it all, but that's really exciting because we'll be doing push notifications that you set up for your property. You want to know how wet it is or when it reaches a certain criteria for wind, rain, and temperatures. We can do that at Rural Weather. It's exclusive to us, and that's going to be a very, very useful feature for those who need to be alerted. Rather than having to read it every day yourself, we'll be sending you alerts for your exact location.
And I absolutely loved, I read in the article that you're hoping to launch it on World Meteorological Day.
Yes, that's the plan, later in March. And so we're going to call it, I think it was Rural New Zealand, Rural Weather Day or something like that. We've earmarked for it. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that as we go on towards March. But yeah, the cool idea to kind of partner the new app with World Meteorological Day and really focusing on weather. And here in New Zealand, our weather is remarkable. I was on an interview with some American forecasters in Wichita, Kansas, part of a very large global weather forecasting company the other day. They were talking about how exciting the weather is in the world, with technology improving. But he also mentioned in all his global dealings that New Zealand has certainly got some of the toughest weather for not just weather forecasters, but clearly those who are working out in it every single day, farming and growing things. And so it's just good to hear from other people that we do have a lovely weather pattern in this country, but it can be very hard to forecast. So it makes it an exciting place to live.
Yes, Phil, an absolute challenge, but of course we have the right man for the job. That's Phil Duncan from Rural Weather, where you can go to ruralweather.co.nz for getting a more localised long-range weather forecast. And Phil will be with us every Monday here on Sarah's Country. But in the meantime, make sure you check out that website, ruralweather.co.nz.
This is Sarah's Country. Catch the latest on the matters that matter most wherever you are. Listen to Sarah's Country on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple or Google Podcasts. Try asking Alexa or Siri. Play Sarah's Country on podcast.
Thank you so much for your comments following along with us on our live show, which is Monday to Wednesday, 7 p.m. New Zealand time. And you can watch on the Sarah Perium Facebook page, the Sarah's Country YouTube channel, Farmers Weekly's Facebook page, and of course, sarahscountry.com, where you can get a live audio feed as well. And of course, our live audience is very valuable to us. We have a lot of regulars, and I think Phil Duncan is certainly proving extremely popular. We've got a message here from Brett. Phil Duncan, the man of reason and sensibility. We love his forecasts and listen to him more than the major media weather reports. His reports are accurate with explanations that we can understand. So thank you so much for sending in that comment. I'll pass it on to Phil. Now, Northern Hawke's Bay farmers are frustrated that other landowners in the area are not doing enough to control possums, leaving them exposed to a bovine tuberculosis outbreak, which Osprey admits it took its eye off. My apologies. Farmers at a meeting organised by Osprey at Portorino said those landowners, including some forestry companies and iwi, are not being held to the same poisoning standards as they are. They called on Osprey to stand up for those not pulling their weight, to take legal action to force them to do more to control possum numbers. Now that was read from a Farmers Weekly in February 2020. We are now in January 2021. And after another round of applications to the Māori Land Court to stop a 1080 drop on the 15,000 hectare Taratakino C block, delaying urgent pest control work to be done, the possums are running riot. Northern Hawke's Bay farmers with infected cattle that need to be killed are out of pocket in the hundreds of thousands. This was right in the thick of lockdown that slowed processing plants to process these infected cattle, and in a drought, these farmers, you can only imagine, have been growing more and more frustrated with their battle with Osprey. We're joined now by one of the Hawke's Bay farmers, Lloyd Holloway, who farms at Taharoto near up the Napier Taupo Road. Lloyd, thank you so much for coming on Sarah's Country. I can only imagine your frustration has been mounting to a point, and we would love to set the scene about your experience with the disease TB in your cattle, and take us right back to where it all started.
Well, we started off, we've been here 23 years.
2002, 2003, we had a reactor, broke down, went to infected status, and there was an agreement at that stage. It was the Animal Health Board running the poisoning programs in conjunction with the regional council. We had quite a meeting here, and it was stated that we had to do extra testing under the buffer, being in a buffer, put us into a buffer and test everything once a year. And if we wanted to sell or move anything to grazing, we had to test within 60 days of it going. So, and we did that on the agreement that whoever was doing the poisoning program was to keep poisoning and keep us safe from TB. So we actually did that for 18 years. We were clear. And everything was chugging along not too bad. The regional council did it up until 7 years ago. There was a herd of a lot of possums here. They got it down to a very low number, actually down to 1% residual crap. And then Osprey took it over the area. And in the 7 years after that, we had one lot of poisoning. Prior to that, we were getting poisoned every second year. And I think we might have gone, I'm pretty sure it was every second year all the way. And monitored in between. Then when Osprey took over in their wisdom, they decided, I'm buggered if I know why, but we only needed poisoning 1 in 7 years. And the ground poisoning was done 1 year, and the 1080 on the forestry and native dock blocks was done but in a different time frame. It wasn't done in coordination. And anyway, we ended up getting reinfested because we were in the buffer hard against the Tatrachina, where the TB has been known to be before we got here. Probably, I don't know, I'm going back probably 30 years. And the last herd of cattle on Tatrachina, I understand, there was 50 cattle that tested over 40 come back positive to TB. So they killed the whole lot. Now they're farming no cattle. Or not farming at all because it's all reverted back. So now we're back to infected status. Osprey come here and told us it was their fault because they hadn't poisoned. A fellow called Kevin Cruz, and he also sat at our table here and told us we wouldn't be financially disadvantaged in any way. And we thought, shit, this is good. So they're going to look after everybody. And we found out it's a load of bullshit, and he just lied to us. Because since then, we've had a report done by MPI, and it says that we're $425,000 out of pocket up until June. And since then, we've had to buy in 800 bales of bales for last winter at our cost. So we're looking at $550,000 roughly. Through Osprey not doing their job. And we were in the original buffer, which I understand there was 54 farms. Now it's blown out, there's 572, I think, and basically goes to the coast on north of Napier. And it's not 100% solid TB, but there's patches of farms breaking down. I think we're up to about 25 or 26 farms. And I've just found out that over towards Lochinvar, which is on the other side of where we are for the native bush and pine trees, 3 dairy farms are broken down there in a group. And then at Reparoa, around Reparoa, Taupo, I understand there's possibly some more. So if you like, from Taupo to the coast, there's scattered infections of TB, which is a massive bloody area, and for them to push it back to the original buffer, I'd say we're going to be in a buffer for at least the next 20 years. So, yeah, you can sort of see why we're a bit pissed off.
I can, absolutely. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers can absolutely sympathise with you, obviously both financially, but also the fact that you felt like you haven't been listened to. What has happened in your relationship with Osprey since that meeting at Putorino in February this time last year in terms of developments towards a goal to improve pest management in the area?
Well, they've come into our valley last November, and we normally used to get about 6 poisoners. Go through, and it'd take them 2.5 months to do the Watcher Valley on the native side of the Mohawk River. This year, we ended up with 2 fellas poisoning, and they were about 6 months. And that's been completed. So you would think there wouldn't be any more breakdowns in the clear herds, but we have just tested, in November, October, we tested clear. We're C1s now. And the day after, one farmer, a farm away from us, he broke down the next day. So what Osprey's done hasn't actually got rid of the problem. And one of the original farmers up at Titira, he broke down, he's tested clear, and he's just broken down again. So whatever Osprey's done hasn't cleared the problem up, and everybody's just sitting there. It's like playing Russian roulette, I suppose. We're just waiting, your luck of the draw, whether or not you stay clear or you get infected. And you talk to Osprey, everybody's got a different answer. And the farmer that just broke down, he had been infected. He got a suspect. They wanted to kill it. He said, well, I want it cultured. And the Osprey vet tried like buggery to talk him out of culturing it, because she said you might get infected and it'll bugger up you getting off TB, infected status. He said, well, I want it tested because I want to make sure it's going to be clear. So he actually went to the works. He got a text from the woman vet again, asking him, to reconsider about getting it cultured. If we can't see anything, we'll classify it clear. He put his foot down and said, I want it cultured, and bugger me days, it's just come back in the last few days as TB. It shouldn't be for the farmers pushing Osprey to do the job. Osprey should be telling us this is what happens, and it should be set in concrete, so everybody's treated the same. But we're not. Some people, if you haven't upset the boat, you get quite a good ride, and if you have a bit of somebody that speaks up a bit like me, you get a bit of a shove up the disc.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that way seems to be in life, Lloyd. But you suggesting that Osprey are wanting a clear status more than a farmer?
Well, it appears like it. They're going to one particular vet, Gillian Atkinson, her name is. It's her area. She's trying to get everybody clear. Apparently, when it started breaking down, I was told she couldn't get her head around that it had broken down here. Well, it has. And now she's pushing everybody to get off and be clear as quick as possible. And it appears by this last event that I told you about that she's prepared to do anything rather than test the cattle properly.
Lloyd,
as far as I'm concerned, if they turn up with a lump, you should be suspended. Yeah. Then they blood test them 10 days later. And if the blood test comes back as not likely to be TB, well, you go back to your original status. Otherwise, you stay suspended. And they culture, when they kill the beast, they culture the glands. And if it turns out not to be TB, well, you go back to your original status and you carry on. If it is, well, at least you know you've bloody got it. Otherwise, this fella could have sold cattle on and passed it on to somebody else.
Lloyd, I do have, in Osprey's defence, there has been news that they will increase testing in higher risk areas. Do you believe that this will help bring down the levels with more testing? You suggest?
Yeah, it will, but they ain't giving the testers any more staff, or bugger all more staff, but they're expecting them to do all this extra testing. Well, the testers we've got to run off their bloody feet, and now they want them doing bovis testing as well. So unless you're going to equip the poor buggers with more staff and help them out, they get, I presume, they get paid on a weekly wage. If somebody wants you to do 50% more, you either bring in 50% more staff, or I dare say you offer them 50% more pay.
Yeah.
And they haven't had the offer of the 50% more pay, but they're expected to do it. These bosses sit in the bloody office, they don't pull their finger out and come and give these fellas a hand. You know?
Yeah. Now, Lloyd, since we spoke previous to Christmas, the application that was before the Māori Land Court on this particular Tata Rakina Sea Trust block was holding a lot of things up, and particularly an aerial drop of 1080. But this seems to just in the last week be dismissed by the judge, basically saying, "Don't come before me again." This will be a positive to get Osprey into an area that's been of concern for over a decade. Yeah,
well, that judgment actually came out on Christmas Eve, so it's nearly been a month, all right? And to date, nothing's bloody happened. We've rung Osprey and asked them, because we were told, we were led to believe that as soon as the word come, we're putting the 1080 on. Now, we're planning. Well, wouldn't you have done some planning whether you were sitting on your backside waiting for the judge to make up his mind? And it's quite urgent, this. Now, it originally was put down to be poisoned in June, July, last winter. The injunction was put in, so they didn't do it. Well, now, exactly what I told you before, it's got uncoordinated with the poisoning they've already done. So basically, whenever they finally make up their mind to do Tatrakina, they've basically got to do all us again, because where they've done has been reinfected from animals from out that haven't been poisoned through. And this has been going on for 18 bloody years. We've had 2 goes at Tatrakina. It's been poisoned once, but too big a gap in between. All that money's down the drain, and now they're back to planning. Well, there's too much planning and not enough poison. And I've got to say, 1080 is a prick of a poison, but for big areas of rugged, steep country, which this is, it's the best and the cheapest method we've got. And until they find something better, we've got to suck it up and just use it. And if it had been used 15, 18 years ago, when we first broke down properly, we wouldn't be infected, other people in Hawke's Bay wouldn't be infected, and wider afield, and the Maori land would be clear. They could do whatever they bloody liked on it. And I've got to say, the majority of the owners of Tatrakina want it done. There's only 2 or 3 that have been a pain in the ass to even their own people for a number of years, before we got here, over bloody 25 years. And they're just holding up their own people. They're actually buggering up their own farms. There's 2 Maori corporations right here, and they've both got TV. It's actually costing their own people, which is a great shame, because and it shouldn't matter whether you're Maori, Pākehā or bloody purple. Everybody should be treated the same. And it seems to be, when I told Osprey to get stuffed at one point, I got a email sent to me of things they could do to me to pull me into line, and I said to them, send that to Tatrakina and tell Tatrakina to do it. But no, never happened. We sat around for 6 months, and we're still sitting around. We're waiting for action, but it's costing all us fellas money. Well, we're waiting for the action. If they had to spend $100,000 in the Watcher Valley here and poison it consistently like the regional council was doing, we wouldn't be in a situation now. And Osprey, we're paying money as levies into this. The forestry companies, they don't pay any levies, but they still get poison, and it's our money, the farmers' money, that's paying for the forestry to get poisoned. And the more trees are going, the less monitoring we've got from cattle, and the more habitat you're creating for the possum. In the Watcher Valley, I'd estimate probably, and I'm only guessing, 2,000 to 2,500 hectares has gone into trees this year. The buffer's just about knackered now because large areas are starting to go into pine trees because it's becoming uneconomic to farm with TB. So if the government wants pine trees, well, they're going to get pine trees, all right, because us fellas can't stay here.
Yeah, it's like there's two plagues on the go blanketing the land where you are. Lloyd, our hearts go out to your situation and that of, as you describe, getting into the hundreds of farmers between Taupo and the coast, whereby the outbreak of TB seems to be getting away. And it's good to see that Chief Judge Winston Isaac of the Māori Land Court has actually put his foot down and said enough's enough. But Osprey has to be very careful in the precedent that they are setting in terms of one rule for one and one rule for another type of landowner. So I look forward to following up, and hopefully we can get a spokesperson from Osprey on Cirrus Country very shortly to follow on from Lloyd Holloway's yarn that he's had there and put to us very frankly. So yes, of course, if you've missed anything on Cirrus Country's Newsmaker show, you can catch us on demand on podcast. Any of the videos as well are on cirruscountry.com. Really loving this new feedback personally in terms of how we're laying it out for you. Our Newsmaker is all about the top stories in this week's Farmers Weekly. And then on Tuesdays, we have a formatted show called Opinion Maker, whereby it is situated around one theme, closed with a panel of industry experts on that particular issue or topic that is a matter that we need to be paying attention to. And this week, I've selected the story about the increasing pressure on honey producers as New Zealand's $69 million a year Japanese honey export market is being threatened by its glyphosate limits, which are believed to be 10 times lower than that of the European standards. But of course, does consumer preference overtake scientific proof? Well, we'll be joined by Raymond Neal, the CEO of Honey Droplets, who spent many years in the Japanese honey market, as well as John Rawcliffe, the chief executive at UMF, Unique Manuka Factor, and Karen Koss, the CEO of Apiculture New Zealand. And we're hoping to have a scientist on from a local university here in Canterbury to bring us some more light around glyphosate limits and the detection of those levels in honey. What is the New Zealand honey industry at risk of this? We will find out more on Cirrus Country's Opinion Maker this week. Of course, you can get in touch, Sarah at cirruscountry.com. Flick me an email. But in the meantime, please take care, and I will see you again soon.